Just set this up. Now, thank you for that introduction. So, my name's Graham Vowles from the Ordnance Survey. I just need to set up the... Sorry, from Blockstore Limited, formerly of the Ordnance Survey, so just make that correction. And in fact, that's a really good distinction to make, because some of what I'm going to say is definitely not Ordnance Survey, so thanks for that. So I do have quite a long history with Inspire, and I also have quite a long history with rights management. I'm active within Network Services Drafting Team, and now as independent, I'm supporting various different clients across Europe with how they adopt Inspire. So I have now quite a broad perspective from different member states, candidate member states, and each of them experiencing quite similar problems. So I think this is quite an issue, and Claire gave a really fantastic summary of where things stand. So this is my picture of where I believe we are with access and use for Inspire data and services. So it's a complex situation, so complex technical landscape. There is limited interoperability across providers. It's a highly complex mix of licensing terms for use and reuse. So the state we have at the minute is very limited or no real business interoperability when it comes to sort of dynamically combining data from different sources. It's a complex and quite often conflicting legal landscape, and it is a confusing legal thing to take on. So one of the activities I did was to support in Croatia them adopting the Inspire directive, and of course you've got to work out what the impact is in legal terms on their legal framework. So I got to find out an awful lot more about the Croatian legal framework and copyright law than I ever thought I'd need to know. But this is a struggle, and what I fear, and what I think a lot of other people do fear, that fundamentally the resulting system will be unusable and also not economically sustainable. So the general sense I do have is it is a confusing and fragmented space out there, and I'm totally support Claire's call to action. I think something really does need to be done here, and I don't think we can pass this issue over any longer. So in the opening plenary, Cameron Eason talked about somebody has to work to cage the beast. And I don't think he was talking about himself. I think he was talking about Inspire, and I think we do need to bring it back under control, and we do need to make it simpler. We do need to make it something that we can all implement, and we do need support to make that thing happen. So where do we go and what do we do? So some time ago I saw this pop up in my browser. Google. Okay, we're going to harmonize all of these different data policies, and large commercial organizations, Google, are putting a lot of time, a lot of investment to making their systems more accessible, more easier to understand, replacing those 60 different privacy policies, one policy to rule them all. And I think that's a great idea, because where their focus is on that user experience. And I think we can only dream of similar kind of interoperability across Inspire. So perhaps we could just, for one moment, dare to imagine what a world might be like, where we're more unified. What would guide us through this very complex political, legal and technical landscape that we see in front of us. So here's a very simplified picture of three key directives which we know and love, and a lot of the work we do falls pretty much bang in the centre, the overlap between the Reuse Directive, Access Directive and Inspire. And I think one of the first legal challenges we have is understanding those three directives, how they're transposed into national regulation, and fitting what our offering is into that quite complex landscape. The second thing is, yes, we have evolving things such as the European Interoperability Framework. So this is about, yes, parts of member states, public bodies, public organisations within member states sharing data and services. And they use this concept of administration talking to administration, A to A. So both within member state and, more importantly, across member state. And then other concepts, including integrating sharing data from administration to business, administration to the citizen. And there's a lot of work going on in the background with the ISA framework, Interoperability Solutions for Public Administration in Europe. And I think as part of the message which Claire put across is, yes, we need to integrate with these ideas, we need to connect in better with the e-commerce and e-government activities that are going on, and also understand better how we want to share our data. I use this model on occasion to represent how I've seen national spatial data infrastructures grow. So they tend to start very public sector centric, so that's public sector providing data to public sector, and it's about sharing data, yes, with central governments, it's about sharing data with the states. And then we also see some business being done in our geospatial sector. So you see data being provided by business within the private sector, perhaps to another business. And likewise with the citizen, we see citizens sharing data. But what we do seem to have is the three islands of interoperability, but within a sea of non-interoperability. So I think part of the challenge we face is about how do we connect these different communities, how do we understand the different use cases that exist for sharing, say, public sector data to the private sector, A to B, how can public sector share data with the citizen, and learning to use the models that we have and build upon those. So we're fairly used to seeing data sharing agreements within public sector bodies. We can see commercial licensing going on for sharing data between commercial bodies, and we can see more open data licensing for sharing of the data with the citizen and between citizens. So we see all of these trends kind of going on simultaneously. And I think what we need to do is perhaps start to think beyond those limits and perhaps look at more balanced ways as to how we can share data and provide a framework to enable that sharing of data to happen. And this kind of stretched my PowerPoint skills is I think we have to start to look at interoperability across these boundaries. So how can we connect the public sector to the citizen? How can we connect the business to the citizen? And how can we get some of those flows going on between our islands of maybe interoperability? And how can we improve the sharing? And what tools can we use? How do we enable that citizen to access public data? How do we enable the reuse of public sector information, sharing of information with business that can be reused? And finally, how do we enable value-added data for the citizen? And I think this is part of the challenge that we face, is if we really truly do want a sustainable network, we're going to have to accommodate this mix of different perspectives and we're going to have to build our infrastructure to allow that mix and that sort of multicultural mix of data to rub along effectively. So what I have in my mind is a situation which is similar to this. It's very confusing. We have sort of one-to-one point connections between data providers and users. Every provider is using different kinds of licensing terms, and it's actually a very confusing environment to operate within. And pretty much I think that's what we have as things stand. What I believe we need to move towards, and I'm starting to see some very valuable work that's been done, for example, in Northern Ireland and other places addressing some of these issues, is I think we need to move towards this much more interoperable way of using Inspire data and services. So my conclusion is similar to Claire's in the sense that I do think there is a call to action. I think we've ignored this issue for too long, and I do think we collectively need to move forward on this. So I would say it's time to take action, talk to your national contact point, and I think what we need is these four things: clear leadership and ownership, genuine guidance about what the member states do in this area of access and use, support and direction on defining simplified, harmonized licensing terms to enable data to be shared more easily, and good, solid example rights management best practice that others can follow and implement. So pretty much that concludes my presentation. So I'd be very happy to take questions and talk to you through some of my thoughts. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Graham. Any questions, Graham?
Stunned silence. You don't have to come forward. Roger.
Roger again.
I know you're working closely with the UK people based there. Have you approached your national contact point about licensing issues, and if you have, what's been the response?
I have, and they're open. So UK's on board. And genuinely, I've spoken to quite a number of different people within the Inspire community, and this is a shared concern. It's a real tough one. I think the real challenge is that it's not a single institution that owns the problem, that it's shared across, and the pain can be very painful, but we don't seem to be able to resolve this. So I think we need to come together. We do need to coordinate ourselves, and I do also think we need that clear leadership.
Thank you. Any other similar experience or feedback from other member states experiencing the same difficulties? Is it only UK?
Cameron.
No, Cameron.
Hey Cameron, it's the beast.
We remain on the island.
Graham, I think your final slide there does encapsulate a number of the issues that have been raised already today, and particularly in the plenary session where Ian was talking about, again, the things that we have to do. And I think I'm still not quite getting what we really have to do, because I think looking at some member states, and I'll not name them, but member states that I'm familiar with, where we have an issue about whose legislation is the best. Okay, so Ian said this morning that we need legislation to make things happen. But we have, if somebody then says, well, yes, I know you've got this European legislation, but actually our legislation trumps it, therefore we are not going to do what Europe says because our legislation is bigger than your legislation. Now, if in that kind of situation, and you mentioned Croatia in a tangle about something that might not actually work, who are the leaders? Who are these people who are actually going to sort this? Because in some cases it's a battle between a member state government and the European Commission, the European Parliament. Who are our leaders to sort this?
Well, I think that's a very valid question. I haven't found them. Is my simple answer. So yes, the legal landscape is complex, but I think fundamentally this is not going to be resolved with law. What I do think we need is mechanisms where the benefit does flow both ways. I think it's the nature of any healthy relationship is where benefit does flow both ways. So I imagine there's certain resistance to adopting these directives and legal aspects where the member states don't see the benefit flowing in both directions.
Okay. Thank you very much.